Hello. So I did an unboxing of this game, Company of Heroes, earlier in the week, and I said I would try to get a how to play of at least the basic game done by the weekend, so that's what I'm trying to do. Hopefully I'll make it. Um, anyway, as I mentioned, this was Kickstarter I did about a year and a half ago. I managed to do one playthrough of the basic rules yesterday, so that's all I'm going to go through in this video. I don't know, uh, if it looks like I'm not going to get it done all in one day, then I may go ahead and add a portion with the advanced rules at the end for those that want to see that. So anyway, let's get started on setup. Alright, so the first thing you'll do is look at this mission booklet and pick a map to play on. The recommended map for your first game is the Trois Ponts map. So that's this one, and that's what I'll set up. And if there's any special setup features or anything, it will say here in the mission booklet. Alright, as you can see, the Trois Ponts map is pretty big. If you have the Terrain Pack 1, which I'm guessing most people that did the Kickstarter at least have the Terrain Pack 1. So if you do, you can place these buildings on top of the pre-printed map buildings. If you don't, it doesn't matter. The buildings are printed on the map. Also, the resource capture point areas are printed on the map. And if you have the Terrain Pack 1, then you can place those flag poles, which are used to denote who controls the area. So I've gone ahead and placed those on the map where all the capture points, resource point areas are. As you can see, it takes up a lot of space. The players would divide up into teams. If you're only playing 2 players, then obviously it's 1 player per team. 1 player would normally sit on that side. Obviously that's a window, so I won't have a player sitting on that side. I'll have both players, which is me, on this side, but 1 player would set up on this side and 1 player on that side. And if you're playing teams, 2 players or however many on each side. Alright, then each player will get a HQ board that looks like this and 8 cubes, and the normal starting configuration is how I have the 8 cubes here. You've got 1 income for manpower, munitions, and fuel, and 0 for victory points. And then you start with a stockpile of 4 manpower, 4 munitions, 4 fuel, and 0 victory points. Each player will get 3 building boards. Normally the building board 1 is face up, and building board 2 and 3 are face down, and those have to be purchased in order to upgrade and flip them over and then be able to build the units on that side. So starting, building 1 is flipped up, 2 and 3 are down, and each faction has their own building boards. And so the same, the first one starts up, second and third down. Each faction will get 9 command point cubes in their color. So I'm playing the Americans and the Germans, so 9 CP cubes for the Americans and 9 CP cubes for the Germans. Now, normally they wouldn't go in this space of the board. That's where if you're playing not your first game, then you would have a commander board that goes there. In the first game, that's not recommended to be playing with. So I'm just setting my command point cubes here as I don't have room to place them next to me. Then each faction will get their miniature tray, which has their infantry figures and vehicles, and then 6 of these infantry trays. So I've got the Americans there and the Germans right there. Then you'll just set to the side all your dice and cubes and extra stuff that, some of this stuff is not used in the beginner game, but there's a tray to contain all your dice and other stuff, and you just set that somewhere near the board if you can fit. Obviously, on my table, I'm out of room, so I'm just setting this down here on this little stool. Then you'll get your starting units. Each faction will start with 2 green or infantry type units. You see the ones that have the green health. So you can choose either 2 riflemen squads or units, or 2 mortar teams if you're the Americans, or 1 of each, which is what I did. And the number in the green hearts is the number of figures that come with that unit. So for example, for the rifleman squad here, I put 4 riflemen in the infantry tray, and then I took 1 mortar team also. So you see that takes 3 infantries, and then I put 1 mortar miniature in there to indicate it's my mortar team. And then both of these just go in your starting spawn area. For this map, it's the first 6 hexes on the bottom left side of the map. So I'm just, can't go in the water. Sorry. So that is not a valid starting point. So maybe my mortar team would start there. And then the same for the Germans. They have, you can pick any 2 of your green. So they have these grenadier and MG42 team, or so they could take 2 of these. 2 of these are 1 of each, so I did 1 of each for the Germans. And again, their starting spawn point is up here. And for the machine gun, you see there's a little machine gun miniature. And theirs is the first 6 hexes here on this side of the map. So they go in their spawn point. So that is set up, and now we're all ready to play. Alright, so how do you play? Well, the game is played in rounds. You can see on the back of this second building here, there's kind of a player aid. So the game is played in rounds, broken up into 3 phases. The first phase is the maneuver phase. And actually, even though it's not listed there, the first thing that needs to be done is determine turn order for the round. That's determined by whoever has the least amount of victory points. Of course, at the beginning of the game, that is tied between the players with 0. And then after that, the victory points, if there's a tie for the least amount of victory points, then you go by income, starting with victory point income, then fuel income, munition income, and manpower income. If that's still tied, then you roll 3 dice, and at the beginning of the game that will always be tied. So at the beginning of the game, you'll always roll 3 dice to see who decides if they want to go first or second. So you'll roll 3 of these white dice, and whichever team gets the most green symbols, which got none there, and the German, that's a green symbol, so the Germans got 1. So in this case, the German team would get to decide whether they want to go first or second for the round. So after that's determined, you go to the maneuver phase, which is actually broken up into 3 turns. In the maneuver phase, each team will spend a total of 9 CP moving their units, and they'll each take a turn where they can spend 3 CP per turn. So in this example where the German team is first, they got to choose whether they want to go first or second. Say they decide they want to go first. So in their first turn of the maneuver phase, they get 3 CP to spend. Now, when you spend CP to move a unit, you just place 1 CP into the spot where you're moving, and then you move your unit like so. Then if maybe you wanted to move this unit 1, then you place a CP and move 1. Then I still have 1 more for this turn, so maybe I want to use this, move this unit again. So I place the CP where I'm going to move them, and you bring your other CP that was spent to move along with it, because a unit can only spend 3 CP per round. So at the end of this first turn of the maneuver phase, the Germans spent 3 CP. Now it's the American team gets to spend 3 CP. So, maybe they want to move here and then move again here so they can capture this point. And they bring that CP with them, and then maybe they want to move these guys here. And they've spent 3 CP. So now it's the second turn of the maneuver phase, so the Germans would have another 3 CP to spend. Now, even though they may want to stay here to capture that point later, let's just, as an example, say they decide they want to move this squad over here, so they put a CP down and move them. Now they've spent 3 CP. This squad cannot move again during this maneuver phase, this round. So a squad or a vehicle or any unit can only move a maximum of 3 CP during a round. So now these other 2 need to either be spent on this unit or just forfeited. So you always have to, every turn during a maneuver phase, you have to spend or forfeit your 3 CP. So we'll just give an example that maybe he decides to move here. I got to bring that one with me, and then here. And then he spent his 3 CP, and so forth. So each turn, each team will go back and forth spending 3 CP. In the basic game, all units, it just costs 1 CP to move 1 hex. You can't move into water squares. Of course, you got to go across the bridges. You can, for 1 CP, a unit can move into a building, like so. But you can't move out of a building the same round that you move into it. And actually, this was a bad example because this is a mortar team, and mortar team cannot move into a building. Only regular infantry teams and machine gun infantry with machine gun can move into a building, but mortar teams, vehicles, mortar teams, anti-tank gun teams cannot move into a building. So the only weapon team that can move into a building is a machine gun team. And the advantage of moving into a building is that it provides heavy cover, which gives you 2 defense, which we'll talk about later when we get into combat. Now some units, like the Jeep and some other units, and even some infantry units like this mortar squad, can be upgraded to have this speed die, and that allows, so it can move its, when you're during a maneuver phase and you're moving the Jeep, if you wanted to, if you're spending, your 3 CP or 2 CP to move this Jeep, it can't always spend that speed die to move 1 space for free. So even if it's moved 3, even if it had moved 3 CP and couldn't normally move another space for the round, you can spend its speed die by flipping it over, and it can move 1 additional space. And so, like I said, some other units can start with that or can be upgraded with that. Like I said, the mortar team can be upgraded, which we'll talk about later, to get a speed die. Alright, so again, you do the maneuver phase where each team will get 3 turns, or each faction will get 3 turns to move, to spend up to 3 CP to move units. Then you go to the damage phase. And I forgot to mention, before you go to the damage phase, after you finish the maneuver phase, you go ahead and remove all CP cubes and just put them back in your play area. So before we talk about the damage phase, we should talk about sight. So each unit in the basic rules, each has a basic, or most units can see 2 hexes away. So this unit can see this unit because he's 2 hexes away. They can see him. However, he couldn't see this unit because he's 3 hexes away. And again, this unit, this mortar team, cannot see this grenadier unit because it's 1, 2, 3 away, and this one is 1, 2, 3 away. So he couldn't see any of these units. These guys can see each other, but he can't see him, and he can't see him. Each unit also has a range, which is indicated here, and you can see it has that the rifleman squad has a range of 2 hexes. The mortar team has a range of 4 hexes, but they can't. This first hex is grayed out. They can't fire into an adjacent hex. So even though my mortar team has a range of 4 hexes, they can only see 2 hexes away. So they could not fire on this team, even though they have a range of 4, and this machine gun team is only 3 away. Because they can only see 2 hexes away, they cannot fire on this MG42 team. Now, however, it's a little different over here, because if you have another unit that does have sight, if one of your units has sight to an enemy unit, then actually, I'm not explaining this right. Then my mortar team would be able to fire on that unit. So, you know, this team is calling in the coordinates of this grenadier infantry squad. So even though my mortar team doesn't have sight to it, my infantry team does, so they're able to tell my mortar team who it is in range, because they're only 3 away and they can fire 4 away. So they could, in fact, still attack this unit. But if my infantry squad was over here, then they don't have sight to them, so they wouldn't be able to fire on them. If my infantry squad was here, then my mortar team would be able to fire on these guys, because my other team of riflemen do have sight to them, and they're able to tell me where they are, basically. So the first thing in the damage phase, after maneuver phase you do damage, first thing is check for pinned units. Now, machine gun teams can pin other green infantry squads if they are in their sight and range. Now, in this case they're not, so we won't go over that just yet. I'll come back and go over what it would mean if this machine gun team was able to pin one of my units. But for now, we'll just say no unit is able to pin anybody, because these guys don't have another, one of the Americans in sight or in range. So first thing, check for pinned units. In this example, there aren't any. So next thing you do is assign damage. So the assigned damage basically all takes place simultaneously, so you can do it simultaneously or in team order. But just since I'm playing solo, it's easier for me to do it in team order. So because the Germans decided to go first, they're going to assign damage. So this team, because it's in range of 2, they have the grenadiers have a range of 2 and they have a sight of 2, so they can fire on this team. So the kind of damage they do is here. Their attack is anti-infantry damage, so they get to do 1. So they would place 1 anti-infantry dice next to here, showing they're doing 1 anti-infantry damage. Now if another unit also was able to attack this unit, they would assign their damage to that unit also at the same time. So next, if this unit was resistant to any of the types of attacks that are going against it, it would roll its defense die, and you check that by looking at the defense matrix. So we know that's my rifleman squad. It's a green unit. It's only resistant to armor piercing attack. So an anti-infantry attack, high explosive attack, or a flame attack, those are just automatic hits. So he doesn't roll any defense dice. He just automatically takes 1 hit, and you denote that by just removing 1 unit. Now, because we have to do simultaneous attack, for now we'll just go ahead and knock 1 unit over. But now this unit gets to attack the German unit, and because the mortar team is in range, he will also get to attack the German unit. So we'll consult what kind of attacks they can do. Well, let's see, the American rifleman just has 1 anti-infantry attack, so he'll assign 1 dice. So we'll put 1 anti-infantry dice, and then we'll check the mortar squad. Remember, they are in range. So they do 1 high explosive attack. So we'll take a high explosive dice and assign that also. There's no other attacks against that unit, so now we consult the defense matrix. And as we know, that grenadier squad is a green or infantry, and they are not resistant to anti-infantry or high explosive, so that's going to be 2 successful hits. So now we would remove 2 units from this squad and 1 unit from this squad. So neither of these squads were destroyed, but they are not at full capacity anymore. Now, to give an example of how a unit with a resistance to an attack might work, we'll set up this Jeep here, and we'll say that this German infantry squad is attacking this Jeep. Well, the Jeep is a light vehicle. You see it has the yellow heart. That means it's a light vehicle. And so it will consult this chart when it's attacked. So you'll see it has a resistance to anti-infantry attack. And that is what that grenadier, they do an anti-infantry attack. So if this grenadier squad was attacking this Jeep, they would do an anti-infantry attack. And, this is my speed dice for the Jeep. That's why that's there to represent that. So they're doing an anti-infantry attack, so they would assign that 1 dice there. And just to make it interesting, we'll say that this machine gun squad is also in range and in sight of that Jeep. And so they also get an anti-infantry attack plus pinned, but of course they can only pin other infantry squads. So they just get 1 anti-infantry attack. So we'll assign that. So there's 2 anti-infantry attacks assigned against that Jeep. Now, again, because the Jeep is a yellow light vehicle and it has a resistance to anti-infantry attacks, it gets to roll both of these dice as a defense roll. If it gets a black or a green result, then those hits are negated. If it gets a red result, which there's 2 of these on there, those 2, then those hits go through. So the Jeep would roll 2 dice. Both of those hits those are both green results, so neither of those hits would go through. So that's an example of how resistances to an attack work. if this unit was down to one unit and the Jeep attacked, say the Jeep attacked and killed this last unit, when the last unit in a squad or last figure in a squad is destroyed, then that unit is destroyed, and the player or the team who destroyed that unit gets one victory point. So they would get to move up their victory point marker 1. So again, looking at the damage phase, you assign damage, roll defense dice, inflict the damage, and then collect any experience. The basic game, you don't do experience, or at least not for your first game. Actually, the basic rules do include experience, but not for your first game. And I'm just going over for the first game. I will mention that at the end about experience, but again, so for now, it's just collect victory points. So you would do that for every unit. Repeat that for every unit that is being attacked by another unit. Again, the buildings, if you have an infantry squad in a building and it's attacked, it gets 2 defense, so it would automatically get to roll 2 dice for defense, and if it got a green or a black result, it would negate 2 hits against it. So after both sides have resolved all attacks against their units, then you go to the supply phase. So first you capture control points. So say we got to the supply phase and we're in this situation. The Germans would capture this manpower control point. So they would put one of their little flags on that pole, because the Germans also are here at this victory point, control point. Then they would capture that and put one of their flags, and simultaneously then they would increase their income of manpower by 1 for capturing that control point, and increase their victory point income because they captured that victory point. Now the Americans, they captured this munitions control point, so they would put one of their flags, and they would move up their munitions income by 1. Now, if you don't have the terrain pack 1 with these flag poles, you would just put these tokens that come with the base game, one side for the red and one side for blue. So you would do that wherever any control points were captured. If you were capturing an enemy's control point, say later on these guys got killed or moved off and the Germans moved in here, then you would swap the flag, and then this team would have to actually lower their munitions income by 1, and the Germans would raise their munitions income by 1. So after you've captured control points and adjusted incomes, then you collect your stockpiles, and you do that based on your income. So they have an income of 1 manpower, so their stockpile for manpower would go up by 1. They have an income of 2 munitions, so their munitions would go up by 2. Income of 1 fuel would go up by 1. And an income of no victory points, so they gain no victory points. Whereas the Germans over here, their manpower goes up by 2 because they have an income of 2. Their munitions go up by 1. Their fuel goes up by 1. And they actually, because they control that victory point control point, their income for victory points is 1, so their victory point stockpile goes up by 1. So after you've collected your stockpiles, then you can purchase units and upgrades. So you can purchase new units for any buildings that you have built. So you could purchase a new rifleman for 4 manpower. So if I wanted to do that, I would spend 4 manpower, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I would put together a new rifleman squad and place them in one of my spawn point areas. If I wanted to buy a new mortarman, again, that's 4 manpower. Jeep is 2 manpower and 2 fuel. Or if you want to build your next building so that you have other units, to build, like for the Americans to build this command post. It costs 1 manpower and 3 fuel, so they would spend that, and then they could flip this over, and then they immediately have other units that they have available to build. And again, the same for this. To build this battalion command post, it costs 2 manpower and 5 fuel. If they haven't already built the tier 2 building, then instead it costs 2 manpower and 6 fuel. But once you build that, then that gives you more units you can build. Now the German faction, they cannot build the tier 3 building until they've built their tier 2. So we saw for the Americans, they could build their tier 3 first, but it just cost them a little more. You can see that for the Germans, that they're required to have built their tier 2 building before they can build the tier 3. So anyway, in the purchase units and upgrades, you can purchase new units, you can build your buildings, or you can upgrade existing units. So the upgrades you have available, you can see down here. Now these on the left side are purchased with experience, which again in your first game you don't play with that. But over here on this right side, you can see that these grenadiers, they can be upgraded for a cost of 4 munitions. They could be upgraded where they do high explosive damage also. So, but that's only per unit. So let's say the grenadiers, the Germans were gonna do that. So they would spend 4 munitions, 1, 2, 3, 4. They would take a die, put the high explosive side in it, and put it in their tray. So now their unit does both 1 anti-infantry and 1 high explosive damage. Now the next grenadier, or if he had other grenadiers on the board, they're not upgraded yet. It's only, that's per unit. So if I wanted to upgrade a separate grenadier unit, I would have to spend another 4 munitions to do that. And you can see you can upgrade an MG team for 4 munitions to either have an additional anti-infantry or an armor-piercing attack. And again, if you did that, you'd spend the 4 munitions, take a dice, depending on your choice, either another anti-infantry or armor-piercing, and put that dice. If you chose the armor-piercing, put a dice in there showing that unit was upgrading. Again, it's only that unit, not all your units of that type. You'd have to spend the munitions again to upgrade another unit. So you can purchase and upgrade as many units as you can afford. Again, new units go into your spawn area. Upgrades, you just upgrade a unit in place. And again, or build your buildings. Once everybody's done with that, then you start a new round by determining round order. So you just keep playing rounds until you reach your victory condition, which is a number of victory points to be reached. There is a short game, which is 13 victory points, medium game, which is 15 victory points, long game is 18 victory points. It's recommended, again, for your first game to play the short game to 13 victory points. Now the score, victory point stockpile score only goes up to 9. So when you reach 10, you're just supposed to mark that with an orange cube, and then continue like that would mean 13. And then first team to reach the victory condition wins the game. Couple more things to talk about. I mentioned in the damage phase, the first thing you do is check for pinned units. So a machine gun team, such as this MG42, German MG42 team, they can pin other infantry units. So other green, enemy green units, except for the machine gun team cannot pin another machine gun team. And they can't pin infantry unit that's in a building. So if this were the case where this machine gun team was here and this infantry squad, rifleman squad was here, at the beginning of the damage phase, this machine gun team, because they are in sight and in range, they could pin that unit. So you would put one of these red dice, that's the pinned indicator, next to that rifleman squad to indicate that they are pinned. And then a pinned unit cannot assign damage, can't move, of course, because this takes place after the maneuver phase. That really doesn't come into play in the basic game. But so that squad, because they're pinned, they won't be able to assign damage to a target. Pinned units can't capture control points. So, for example, if this team was here and they were here and this machine gun team was here and they pinned this infantry squad, they would not be able to assign damage to a target, so they wouldn't be able to fire back on these guys. They also would not get to capture this control point if it wasn't already captured. In this case it is, but if it wasn't captured, they wouldn't, or if it belonged to the other team, they wouldn't get to capture it, when you got to the supply phase. And pinning lasts in the basic game until the end of the round, and then the pinning would end. A couple of other things to talk about. Buildings block line of sight. So if this was the case where we had this rifleman squad here and this German infantry squad here, they could not see each other, even though they're only 2 spaces away from each other. They don't have line of sight. To determine the line of sight, you go from the middle of the starting hex to the middle of your target hex, and if it crosses through a building, then there's no line of sight. Now, even though this mortar squad doesn't have line of sight, if this team was here, where they do have line of sight, and this mortar squad's range is 4, because they do high explosive attack, that is not blocked by buildings. So they would actually be able to, because they have sight for them and they're within range 4, they would still be able to assign damage to that German MG42 team. Just a couple of other things to mention. I said when infantry units take damage, you remove units from their little tray here, and that shows their health. Vehicles are a little different. You have these orange cubes, so as they take damage, you put these orange cubes in the hex they're in to denote how much damage they've taken, and then of course once they've taken their maximum damage, for instance that Sherman tank I've got out there has a health of 4, so as soon as it had 4 damage taken, then that would destroy that unit. Another thing to mention is the reinforcement. So some vehicles like the Jeep, they have this reinforcement icon, so it can heal adjacent infantry units. So during the supply phase, if this Jeep is adjacent to an infantry unit, a green unit that has taken casualties, so this rifleman squad normally has 4 units, but one of them's been killed. In the supply phase, because this Jeep has the reinforcement ability, he could then heal this unit 1 point and place an infantry back in there. The other place you can do reinforcement is some maps will have default reinforcement points. So on this Toipon map, here for the this side is their default reinforcement point. So if a infantry unit was here during the supply phase, they would get to heal 1 unit. That's for this side, and here where it says 2B for the other side. So that's a default reinforcement point to heal units. And some units, like this rifleman squad, they have this repair, this wrench icon, so they can actually repair vehicles. So if it was the case where say this Jeep had one damage and this infantry squad was next to it during the supply phase, because they have that wrench icon, they can repair 1 point of damage on a vehicle they are adjacent to, so they could remove this one damage. And one other thing I should probably mention, the only units that can capture these capture points or resource areas are green units, which are infantry, or units like the Kubel wagon that have this unit can capture points symbol, this yellow and black symbol. The Jeep also has that. So those units can capture control points as well as all green units. So I think that pretty much covers the basic rules. Why don't we go through a few example turns? I think I've got everything set back up kind of how I had it right after I did setup. So we'll go through some example turns, starting with check for first, which team goes first. So again, always at the beginning of the game, because everything is set the same for all the teams, you're always going to be rolling the dice to determine turn order. So we'll start, we're going to use this little dice tray my daughter made me several years back. Obviously it's kind of, well, you can tell. Anyway, so we're going to roll 3 dice for the Americans. They got no green. And then we'll roll for the Germans. They got no green. So I guess we'll have to roll again. Here's for the Americans. No green. Here's for the Germans. Now they got a green. So they will go first. Alright, so we're in the first turn of our maneuver phase. So Germans get 3 CP to spend. So they're going to spend 1 to move this Grenadier squad here, another CP to move this Grenadier squad here, and a 3rd CP to move this Grenadier squad right here. Alright, that's their 3 CP for the first turn. Alright, the Americans are going to do something similar. They're going to move 1, 2, move that squad there, and then they'll move 1 to move this mortar squad here. That's the end of their first turn. Alright, back to the Germans. They have another 3P to spend. Now, 3 CP to spend. Now, they can't move these guys, even if they don't want to, because they want to capture this point. But even if they wanted to, because they've already moved 3 CP, that's all they can do for the round. So just to kind of do this quickly, we're going to, oops. See, they're going to move 1, 2, 3. So they're just going to move all there, move the CP in there, and so now they're there. That's their 3 CP for the turn. Alright, it's the Americans' second turn in the maneuver phase. They don't want them. They could move these guys with one more CP, but they want to capture that point, so they're not going to. So they're going to move these guys here and these guys here, so they could capture this point. They have 1 more CP to spend. They're going to forfeit it. And now we go back to the Germans. They have 3 CP to spend for this turn 3 and final turn of the maneuver phase. But they don't want to move. They want to stay where they're at so they can capture those points in the supply phase. So they're going to forfeit these 3 CP. Now we come back to the Americans again. They still, for their final turn of the maneuver phase, they have 3 CP to spend. Again, they don't want to. Even if they did want to, the only one they could move is this one. Could move 1 because this one's already moved 3. He couldn't move anyway. Kind of the same thing with the Germans over there. They couldn't have moved any more if they wanted to because they had each moved 3. But Americans don't want to move, so they're going to forfeit their 3 CP this maneuver phase. So that's the end of the maneuver phase. Now we would go to the damage phase. Nobody is within sight or range of each other, so nothing's going to happen in the damage phase. So we go on to the supply phase. We'll go ahead and start with the Germans. They're first. They're going to capture this manpower CP control point and or resource point, and this fuel. So we'll put their little flags on there. And again, if you don't have the terrain pack, you would just use those cardboard tokens. So they're going to increase their manpower and their fuel incomes by 1. The Americans, they captured a manpower and a fuel also. So I put their flags on the ones they captured, and that will increase their manpower income by 1 and their fuel income by 1. I did notice at the end of the maneuver phase I should have removed these CP cubes. I did not do that, so I'll go ahead and do that now. Again, you're supposed to do that at the end of the maneuver phase. Alright, so we're back to our supply phase. We did the capture control points. We adjusted our incomes for the control points that we captured. And now we'll collect our stockpiles. So the Americans get 2 manpower, 1 munition, 2 fuel, and no victory points. Pretty much the same for the Germans. They get 2 manpower, 1 munition, 2 fuel, and no victory points. Alright, so now we go to purchase units and upgrades. We'll just say the Americans, they're going to spend 2 manpower and 2 fuel to purchase a Jeep. So they'll spend 2 manpower, 2 fuel, and get them a Jeep. Goes in their spawn area somewhere, so we'll just put them there. And don't forget they get the little speed die. And then we'll say the Americans are also going to spend 1 manpower and 3 fuel. 1 manpower and 1, 2, 3 fuel to build their company command post building. So they'll flip that over. And I think that's all they're going to spend this turn. Alright, the Germans, we'll say they're going to build another machine gun team. So that's 4 manpower. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So they need to get 3 units and a little plastic machine gun and put it in the tray. So I've got that assembled here. And then it has to go into their spawn area, which is one of the first 6 things here. We'll say they're going to spawn right here. And maybe they want to go ahead and build their second building too, so that costs 1 manpower and 3 fuel. And now they'll be able to build. And that's all they're going to spend this time also. Well, no, we'll say they're going to go ahead and do an upgrade. So they're going to upgrade the grenadiers they have for 4 munitions and make them have high explosive damage also. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Spend 4 munitions. And they get the high explosive die and put it in their tray with their grenadiers to remind that they have that damage now they can do also. And that ends the supply phase. I mean, we would check for victory points, but obviously nobody has any yet, so nobody's won the game. So now we go to the next round where we determine the turn order. Again, that goes by victory points first. Nobody has any. So then you go by income. Everybody's income for victory points is the same. So you go to the next stat, which is fuel, 2 for both of them. Next stat. So they're still tied. They're tied in all their stats. So again, we've got to roll dice. So this is for the Americans. They got 1 green. This is for the Germans. They got no green, so the Americans will be going first this round. Alright, first turn of the maneuver phase. Got 3 CP to spend. They're going to move their Jeep. 1, 2, 3. So he's going to move 1, 2, 3. We just move that CP to show. But he has a speed die, so he can move 1 for free. So we're going to spend that and have him come to where this victory point thing is. And because the Jeep has the capture symbol, he should be able to capture that. Alright, Germans' turn. They've got 3 CP to spend. I keep saying P. Alright, they're going to move these guys that they spawned. 1, 2, 3. Oops. These buildings can kind of, so move all CP there. So those guys won't be able to move again. Alright, that's their 3 CP for the turn. Alright, back to the Americans. I think they're going to move these guys. So they're going to go 1, 2, 3. They're going to move their mortar crew. And that's that 3 CP. That's it for their turn. Alright, back to the Germans. These guys can't move. We do have 3 CP to spend. So they're going to move these guys 1, 2. They're going to move up into this building, and they will be able to fire down on that mortar crew. So they spent 2 to move in there. Because they moved into a building, even though they have 1 more CP where they could move again if they wanted to, if you move into a building, you can't move out again that round, so they have to stay in there. Still have 1 CP to spend, so let's move this machine gun crew 1. Alright, final turn of the maneuver phase. We got 3 CP to spend for the Americans. Those guys have moved 3, those guys have moved 3, so they couldn't move even if we wanted to move them. Only guys left to move are this rifleman squad. So we'll move them 1, 2, 3. I'm trying to kind of move over here to capture this point, and that's going to move all 3 of those CP there with them. And the Germans' final turn. They've got 3 CP to spend. Those guys can't move because they moved into the building. Those guys can't because they've already spent 3 CP. So I can move these guys 2 CP. So let's move them 1, 2. So that's just going to move all 3 of those there. And we'll have to forfeit this last one. Alright, that's going to end the maneuver phase. Now we go to the damage phase. First thing we do is check for pinned units. So, this machine gun team is in range and in sight of this mortar team, and they can pin another green unit. The mortar team is green, so this machine gun team, they can pin 1. Whenever you attack, you can only attack 1. In the basic rules, units can only attack 1 other unit or pin 1 other unit. So this machine gun team is going to pin this mortar squad. So that's we don't have another machine, well, we do have another machine gun team over here, but there's nobody they can pin. So we've done the check for pinned units. Now we assign damage. So first we have this grenadier squad up here. They are in sight and in range of this mortar team down here, and we see that they have 1 anti-infantry attack, and because they're upgraded, they have 1 high explosive attack. So we'll put this anti-infantry and high explosive attack on them. Then also this machine gun team is in range, and because they have them pinned, and they get one anti-infantry attack plus the pin. Well, we've already put the pin, but they're going to add an anti-infantry attack. Now, normally the mortar squad there, mortar team, would be able to assign damage to one of these units, pick one and assign damage to it, but because they're pinned, they can't do that. You can't, when you're pinned, you can't assign damage. You do get to roll for defense, but in this case, that's not going to matter because a green team doesn't get to defend against anti-infantry or high explosive. You know, when we check the defense matrix, green team, which is what the mortar team is, there's no resistance to anti-infantry or high explosive. So nobody else to assign damage. These guys aren't attacking anybody. These guys aren't in range to attack anybody. So that's all the damage to be assigned. So now we roll the defense dice. Well, there's none to roll here because this team is not resistance. So we just inflict the remaining damage, which is going to be 3, which is enough to, as you see, destroy all 3 of these people. The machine gun doesn't count. The mortar doesn't count. So this unit is destroyed. So that's going to give the Germans 1 victory point for destroying the unit. Okay, Lord, again, we forgot to remove, at the end of the maneuver phase, I forgot to remove these cubes. Let's clear up these dice. And so that's all the damage to be assigned. So now we go to the supply phase where we capture control points. So this Jeep will capture this control point. I get to put a flag. Maybe, if I can get it on there. Hold on. Alright, so that's going to increase the American victory point income by 1. And no other control points were captured by the Americans. These guys were going for 1, but they didn't reach it. The mortar squad was here, but they got destroyed, so that's not captured. No, these guys didn't make it, so no other victory point or capture points were taken. So no other incomes to adjust, so now we collect our stockpiles. So the Americans have an income of 2 manpower, so theirs moves up 2. 1 munitions, that moves up. Fuel, 2. And 1 victory point. They have income of 1 victory point. The Germans have an income of 2 manpower. 1 munition. 2 fuel. And income of no victory points. So they do have the 1 they got for destroying the American unit. But anyway, that's 2 complete turns. I think you can kind of see how the game works. When somebody gets to 13 victory points, again, if you're playing your first game, which the recommended is 13, then you win. So hopefully that gives you a good idea. I will not add to this video. I think it's already long enough. I will talk about commanders real quick, since after your first game, but still part of the basic rules, it does add commanders. So let me talk about that real quick. Alright, 2 things get added to the basic rules after your first game. That's commanders and experience. So experience, that just pretty simple. It works. The first time you damage an enemy unit in a round, you get 1 experience, and you just put that cube in your experience section there. That's only once per round, and when you damage a unit, the first time you damage a unit, you get 1 experience for that. Thereafter, in that round, you only get experience for every unit you destroy. You get an additional experience. Then the experience you gain here can be spent on upgrades. For instance, for 2 experience, you can upgrade your rifleman to have an armor piercing or anti-infantry attack die, or for here you can add a high explosive. So experience can be spent for upgrades, and also you can choose at any point. You can choose a commander. Each faction has up to 5 possible commanders. But once you choose one, as soon as you've bought one of the upgrades that a commander can give you, you have to stick to that one. So, for instance, if the Americans chose they were going to use this airborne commander, then these give you options to unlock these different tiers of this commander. So, to unlock the first tier of your commander and have this ability, you would spend 2 experience. Once you've spent that, you can put that cube showing you've unlocked the first tier of your commander, and then this ability would be available. So paratroopers, place a rifleman squad on any empty box on the map, but it has double slow the first round. Now you have to pay those costs, and double slow we haven't talked about. That's actually an advanced rule, so I'm kind of confused why they would allow commanders in the basic rules when some of these rules are advanced rules. But anyway, then if later you got more experience and you wanted to unlock the second tier, it would cost you another 2 experience. You'd put a cube in there, then your second tier ability of that commander would be available. In this case, a unit that can capture points may capture a control point anytime during the maneuver phase. Costs 3 munitions to capture a victory point. So I guess to capture normal resource points during the maneuver phase, it would cost you 2 munitions, but if you were trying to capture a victory point, control point, it would cost you 3. But you could do that in the maneuver phase instead of waiting till the supply phase. So anyway, the commanders just give you different abilities you can unlock and use during the game. So that's pretty much it for the basic rules. I'm going to quit at that point. So what do I think so far? Well, I've only played one game, and I played it solo, which as I always say in my videos, that's not as fun usually. There is actually an AI for solo, which I have not tried yet. Maybe I'll try that pretty soon. I just played as 2 different players, which is my preferred way of playing when I'm playing by myself. But anyway, seems fun. The rule book, I had a little bit of trouble with some things, so I had to look online. So I'd say the rule book's okay. It's not bad, but just wasn't clear on some things. Otherwise, I was a pretty big fan of this video game. I played it a lot, multiplayer, and I think this captures it pretty well. So I think they did a good job at that. Components are great. There's a lot of good to it. Again, with one play, it's hard for me to really say whether sides are balanced or anything like that. I think I read there's already some errata and some play changes coming in the works. They're doing another Kickstarter campaign, I guess, in the near future, and I think they said there's going to be an upgrade pack to get the changed cards and that kind of thing, so we'll see. But anyway, after one game, I think it's fun. I will probably play the advanced rules this week and maybe put up another video next week just going over the advanced rules. But that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.